Hi everyone, and this is an overview of your scholarly project logic model. Now, prior to this point, you've actually done some of the content of this form, so you've already established your problem, you've already done an annotated bib, so those are going to be key pieces that you are going to apply in the logic model. With that being said, what we're going to do is go through the thought process of doing a scholarly project, implementing evidence-based practice in practice. So what we're doing is systematically taking a look at the organization, a brief overview of the organization, what kind of population does it serve, what is the makeup of the organization, what specifically is unique to that organization, and then going into the organization vision and mission. And when we're thinking about implementing evidence in practice, we want to make sure that what we are doing is congruent with the organization mission and vision. So we should be able to connect our projects with the vision and mission. And then, of course, we have our title. You're going to take a look at the course, and there is information on Boyer's domain of scholarship. So you want to connect the dots. You want to take a look at your project and which domain does your project specifically fit within. So you want to identify that, and you want to indicate why you chose that domain and why is it appropriate for your project. Then you'll go into you'll go into the stakeholders, and this is very, very fundamental for any kind of project, is engaging those stakeholders for success. So who needs to be involved? And very often those who need to be involved are well beyond those who are actually doing in the project. There are many considerations as far as departments, individuals, who will impact this improvement, who will impact this change, who are those who must give permission beyond the organizational permission that you receive through your IRB exercise, who needs to be involved to make sure that this particular evidence-based practice implementation is successful, not only in the implementation process, but also in the sustainability process. We want to look at any barriers and challenges, and invariably, whenever we're doing any kind of improvement, any kind of change, any kind of implementing evidence-based practice, there are barriers, there are challenges, so very often we don't anticipate some of those. So it's really important to do that investigation up front to kind of mitigate errors or problems in the future. So also you're going to decide what change or improvement model or theory you plan to use. And for a change, it may be Cotter's, it may be Lewin's, but you're going to specifically delineate what that model entails, and if you're doing an improvement process, PDCA, so you're going to outline each one of those steps and show that you've done the research and you know how to, the components of the different change or improvement models and how that applies. So make sure that you cite your source using APA format of the model, of the theory, or the change steps. So be very clear and very concise about the model itself, the steps, the components of that model, and make sure that you have a reputable resource. And very often we go to the original works when we're citing any kind of change improvement model or theory. So now we dive into that logic model. Those are the kind of background type of aspects that we need to consider. So we're going to talk about our identified issue or improvement and include the rationale for the improvement, the why behind the rationale. Then diving into what did you find in your annotated bib. And when you're examining what's in the literature, you want to be very clear about how that specifically correlates with your organization. So for instance, maybe an action that was done in the research that was in a large teaching organization, teaching hospital, may not work in a critical access hospital, or vice versa. Something that worked well in one maybe urban community maybe doesn't work well in a rural community. So those are the things, as even though it's in the evidence, it may have been affected, you have to use your wisdom whether or not it would work in your area of practice. And that's part of the reason why we do that background information on the organization, because it has to tick and tie with the fundamentals of the organization. And then from that, you're going to design an overall goal. You can have more than one goal if you would like, and that's perfectly fine. You want to make sure that the overall goal for your implementation is very clear and correlated with the change or the improvement. And then you're going to outline those key objectives. You're going to have 3 or more objectives, and you're going to write them in SMART format. And remember to have each one of the components of SMART format in your objectives. So you want to be very specific. You want to make sure that you have those measurable aspects. You want to make sure that your objectives are achievable, and each one of those objectives needs to be working towards your ultimate goal or goals. It needs to be relevant, and it needs to be time bound. So you need to have some kind of measurement of how you're going to achieve and in what time frame. And then you're going to devise those specific strategies to then achieve your objectives and ultimately your goal. So you're going to put that in timeline format, and you're also going to correlate the timeline with your change or improvement models. So for instance, if you are doing plan, do, check, act, you would put your timeline together, and then you would define what you would do in the plan phase, and then what would you do in the do phase, and on and on. So you want to be very systematic to show that you're using evidence-based change or improvement processes to implement your project based on the different components of your timeline. So you're going to maybe have a heading of plan, and then you're going to list what you're doing in your timeline under plan, and then you're going to have a heading of do, then you're going to list out what you're going to do during that stage. So be very clear with that. Again, this is showing those competencies that you're not only applying the best evidence in your timeline as far as your strategies, but you're also using that evidence-based change or improvement process. So then you're also going to examine and delineate your outcomes and how you're going to integrate your change or improvement in workflow. So how are you going to make sure that this sticks, so to speak? So you want to be very specific about how the change will be a part of the organization. So very often we do changes and they don't necessarily stick. So what are the methods that we're going to make sure that this will continue on? Would it be a topic at huddles? Would it possibly be something that you want to evaluate, do some quality control measures? You're designating who's going to assure that there's continued compliance with the change, those types of things. And then we're going to really dive into those very specific evaluation metrics. How did you indeed achieve your objectives, and how did you achieve your goals? So you want to have very specific metrics, and sometimes we do things to move Press-Ganey scores. Just remember that in this practicum you have to have metrics that measure your process and you have the results. So very often Press-Ganey, it takes months or more to get the results of a change, so that may not be the best metric. You want to design your metrics so it's very specific to your goals and objectives, and how are you measuring that? How are you saying that your project is successful? How are you saying that it maybe needs some continued improvement? And how are you saying maybe this did not work how it was planned, and you want to suggest going to the drawing board again? So you will actually report your final results in your presentation. So know that you have to have those results in order to do your final presentation. So keep that in mind as you're designing the evaluation metrics. They need to be very concrete and something that you can report on in the future. And then we dive into our reflection. What did you learn from this experience? How will you apply it in practice? All those types of things to think about, and how will you influence practice in the future? So, and then of course you need to cite your references using APA format and back to the content. If you have information that you're using from references, you do need to cite those references. This is not a paper by any means, but if there's materials that you're citing from a reference, use the in-text format to cite in the body of your logic model, and then you will have a formal reference list at the end of the logic model. So like always, if you have any questions or concerns, let me know, but this is a very exciting time to really put everything that you've learned into action. Take care now.